Much of the state was impacted by severe weather this week, flash flooding affecting roads, even stopping some rail travel. We will hear from an expert on the rail system, calling on the state to do more to protect train travel in our future. Hello and welcome to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. This week, severe thunderstorms causing significant damage in several parts of the state. Flash flooding causing Amtrak service in the Hudson Valley to be suspended for several days. Service was suspended on the Hudson line for, again, several days, impacting nearly 14,000 riders per day. MTA workers, contractors working diligently, trying to clear all the fallen trees and the water and mud and the boulders from the tracks all on the rail line. Service was ultimately restored by Wednesday morning.
People worked all through the night and all through the day, some people working 24 hours consecutively to put the railroad back together again.
What we're going to continue doing is monitoring, making sure that people are aware of circumstances, because the last thing we ever want to have is a situation where people are stranded on a track.
These severe storms have thrown into the spotlight just how important rail service here is in New York State. I'm joined now by Bruce Becker, the Communications Director for the Rail Passengers Association, for more on this. And Bruce, first of all, welcome to the show. And boy, did we find out quickly, we do need our rail system, don't we?
Well, good to be with you, John. And indeed, this past week, the unprecedented rainfall there in the eastern part of the state was truly catastrophic. And indeed, it does go to show when the trains aren't running, it's a big impact on everybody in the capital region all the way down to New York City.
Were these storms, you've been in the rail business for so long, were these pretty much unprecedented, what they did in terms of debris on the tracks, water in areas, just making it unsafe? This was different, wasn't it?
It was, and again, everybody talks about 100-year storms or 1,000-year storms, whatever it is, but the bulk of the damage on the line that goes from Albany to New York City, which Amtrak operates over, occurred between Poughkeepsie and Croton Harmon on the Metro North section of the line, and it was as bad as we've ever seen it, and certainly as bad as Metro North has seen it. Over recent years, of course, there's been hurricanes, there have been other heavy rain events, but a number of washouts occurred and a number of spots where landslides covered the track. So it was pretty catastrophic. You know,
Bruce, when you live upstate, you're in the Buffalo area, I'm around up in Albany, you go towards the Adirondacks, anywhere up here, most people get where they want to go in their car. So I don't know if they really appreciate how much rail is important, especially downstate, correct?
Well, certainly is very important. Of course, you have the New York metropolitan area, which is served by MTA, the Metro North Railroad that operates in the Hudson Valley from Poughkeepsie south. The lines that operate from inland also are all very important. But Amtrak offers a service across the state. Amtrak's Empire Corridor, which is funded by New York State, provides 4 round trips a day from western New York here in Buffalo, Niagara Falls, New York City. And ridership on that line is up over what it was back in 19 pre-pandemic at the moment. So more and more people are taking the train, and more people are taking the train for shorter trips, like Buffalo to Syracuse or Rochester to Albany. So that's all good news.
Yeah, it certainly takes the stress out of the driving, and with tolls and gasoline, it sometimes can be more cost effective to ride the rails, correct?
No question about that. Particularly if you're by yourself, and I travel a fair amount, with the tolls on the thruway and the cost of gas, the train is often cheaper than driving yourself. Now again, there is convenience factors involved with that, of course, but from a sheer dollars and cents standpoint, Amtrak's a good value in New York State, and again offers convenient departures, and most importantly, reliability, on-time performance has improved over the last couple of years. So a much better chance you're going to get to where you want to be on time.
I know year after year there's always a call for more investment in infrastructure or the rail system, but I was looking at one article that I know is near and dear to your heart, where they were looking to make cuts, I believe it was in Washington. Can you talk about that a little bit? Why would they be making cuts to rail?
Well, of course, everything is politics these days, and whichever side of the coin you might fall on, we feel that public transportation and passenger rail is a bipartisan issue. We all need to travel. And this past week, indeed, the Republican-controlled House advanced appropriations for next year that would include an 80% cut to Amtrak's federal funding. That would be basically the death knell for Amtrak, not only here in New York State, but across the country. And this is in a time when Amtrak is carrying more passengers, not quite back to where they were pre-pandemic nationwide, but getting very, very close. And Amtrak has very good plans to improve service both here in New York State and across the country. So we certainly don't feel it's the time to cut back on Amtrak and investment in passenger rail in general.
Do you know what their justification was for wanting to take this money away and put it somewhere else? Because it's such a huge, it's not like 5%. I mean, it's 80%, that's a huge number. Why would they want to do this?
Well, again, without getting into the political side of things, it's hard to think what the controlling party in the House is thinking these days on some topics. But certainly, it doesn't make sense to us who are longtime rail advocates, and particularly representing the passengers here in New York State, where Amtrak is so important, that the idea of that federal support, in essence, going away entirely. No, New York State potentially could fund it themselves, but again, it's not like New York State has unlimited funds either. And it would be a big issue. It would be a big detriment, particularly for those folks in the capital region that rely upon Amtrak to go to New York City on a regular basis.
Yeah, it might be one of our congressmen trying to call you now. If it did go away, if they waved a wand and suddenly we didn't have Amtrak service the way we have it now, it would be devastating for the state, wouldn't it?
It certainly would be. Over 1 million passengers a year are carried by Amtrak in New York State. The bulk of them are in the Hudson Valley between Albany and New York City, but it is a very, very important travel option for the state. And we have not heard what the House Republicans might be considering for transit funding, which is the funding that goes to support MTA's operations. That would include Metro North. But if they're willing to cut Amtrak, one would think perhaps they're also looking to cut federal transit funding that might jeopardize Metro North operations too. And certainly in the New York metropolitan area, that would be a huge problem for folks who need to get around.
We only got about a minute left, but I'll give you a chance to kind of toot your horn a little bit for the rail service. If somebody hasn't ridden on the train in a decade or more, what are they missing? Just that, first of all, the cars are nicer, cleaner, and just that relaxing feature of looking out the window and not worrying about the traffic?
Well, there's no doubt about that. It's all-weather service, short of floods, which of course are catastrophic things you can't plan on. Wi-Fi service is available on all the trains that operate in New York State. On the trains that serve the longer distances, a nice selection of food and beverages are available in a cafe car. It's reserved seating, so you know when you get on, there'll be a seat ready for you. And again, the fares are very, very attractive, generally speaking, in New York State. Now, again, you wait till the last day to buy your ticket, obviously fares go up.
Sure.
And trains do sell out here in New York State. So the word always is plan ahead, think of Amtrak, think of taking the train instead of driving, and enjoy the trip.
Yeah, Bruce, I tell everybody going from Albany to New York City, so you sit on the right side on the way down so you can look out at the beautiful Hudson River. You might even see an eagle or two flying over there. Bruce Becker from the Rail Association, thanks for coming out today. We do appreciate it.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bruce. As the cleanup continues from these storms, residents are faced with many challenges to regain what was lost. When we come back, we'll talk with an insurance expert on the pitfalls homeowners may be facing filing a flood claim and the steps you can take if you're ever in that situation. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. As New York begins to recover from the flash flooding that hit parts of our state, the governor's taking steps now to protect residents from financial hardship. Following the state of emergency declarations in several impacted counties, the state's price gouging laws took effect. These laws prohibit selling goods or services to consumers in an affected area for what they call unconscionably excessive prices. Additionally, teams from the Department of Financial Services are being deployed to multiple counties to answer insurance-related questions for the home and business owners as they look to file claims on all that storm damage.
Now becomes the cleanup. With the cleanup comes the damage assessment. So we need individual homeowners to be trying to quantify the value of the damage that has been done and to work with their insurance companies. As I said, I will deploy the teams on the ground to help them with that effort.
Navigating flood insurance claims can sometimes be a more daunting task to homeowners than the physical cleanup of their home or backyard. Joining us now to give additional insight on the insurance claim process, Tully Rinky attorney Ryan McCall. Thank you for coming back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you again. Let's talk about flood claims, because right out of the gate, some people must be thinking when they're looking at flooding in the yard or basement, what box did I check when I got my insurance 10 years ago? They probably don't even know what they have covered, I'm assuming, right out of the gate.
Most of the time, yes, which is why every time that I'm representing somebody in a house closing, I always recommend to them a broker that I trust. The insurance brokers and dealers are going to be your best friend in these situations. Typically, they're going to be the first ally you're going to look to when you're saying, hey, is this covered under my insurance? What do I submit with this claim? They're going to be the people that are able to guide you through that process.
Do you usually have to specifically have flood insurance, or is there some wiggle room there where sometimes it could be covered depending on how it came to be?
So it's always circumstantial. Typically, and a lot of times when you're purchasing a property, if you're in a flood zone, the bank will almost always require you to get flood insurance. That's the bank being able to make sure they're hedging their bets, so to speak, so they're covered in the event something goes wrong. You are correct where sometimes if there is damage related to water that may be related to a flood, it could also be covered under other things. Say the flood starts an electrical fire, at that time that may be able to trigger your fire or other type of homeowner's insurance, but I can't recommend enough in a situation like this to always get the flood insurance. Usually if you're not in a flood zone, it's a nominal cost.
But you should really talk to them and look. Years ago when we had an ice storm, I had an issue in the house. The ice storm I wasn't covered, but the ice storm caused a tree to fall, and that was covered. So don't assume the other way, right? Talk to your insurance agent right away and say maybe there's a way to figure this out.
Absolutely, and if you're in the situation where, say, you have a lot more trees or you are in that area where these type of things may happen, talk to the broker and say, run some hypotheticals. Hey, if this tree falls, if, say, there's water damage here, is my house going to be covered? And they're going to be the ones that you can point to. And I always recommend doing it via email because you have something to fall back on. Say something does go wrong years later and you can say, well, listen, I reached out to my broker. They told me I'm covered. This is now their problem.
Right, and it's also, I would think, too, you might get a no right away where someone says, oh, it was a storm, it was an act of God, we don't cover that. People give up, but if you keep appealing or digging a little bit deeper, I'm assuming then sometimes you can maybe get some flexibility there.
Absolutely. I never recommend anybody to take it on their face value. So say they get an initial insurance denial. I've dealt with this before in my career where something's come in and they'll say, no, we don't cover that. Then you talk to the insurance broker or the insurance company and start saying, listen, we may need to escalate this. We have reasonable belief based on X, Y, and Z that this is covered under the policy. At that time, you may see the insurance company say, well, let's have a discussion. And it usually always depends on the cost. If it's something where they may think, hey, it's more beneficial to just pay it out now rather than have to invest tens of thousands of dollars in litigation, the insurance company is almost always going to try and work with you to avoid that.
Yeah, it's interesting how it works. I remember having a tree that was leaning, it was precarious, and I said, if I want that taken down, is it covered? They said, no, we won't cover it, but if it falls, we'll cover the damage, which could be 20 times the cost of taking the tree down. But that's the way it goes sometimes. When do you want to get a lawyer involved in any of this? Because you're an attorney. Do you get calls sometimes people say, hey, I'm not getting satisfaction here, I want to get a lawyer involved?
Absolutely, and I always talk to my clients initially and say, once it happens, it's never a bad idea to at least reach out to a lawyer once something initially happens. So say the tree falls or there is flood damage and you're not sure if your insurance company is going to cooperate or not, reach out to an attorney right at the onset. They're going to be the ones who can sit there and review the entire policy and let you know, hey, here are the risks, here are the options, we may be able to help you, there may be some wiggle room here, etc.
When people they'll watch the news and hear that somebody's been declared a disaster area and the feds are going to come in with FEMA and throw a bunch of money to the governor or the state or a county, do people have any access to that money, or is that typically just state money to go in and fix roads and bridges and that kind of thing?
Usually in situations like that, it goes directly to the state. However, you may see the state begin to offer sponsored programs where they will say something like, if you believe your house was damaged as a result of the flood or something related to it, reach out through this program. There may be grants, funds, things available where you can help offset your own costs.
Right, right. And we talked about this before. Involving a lawyer doesn't always mean huge expense, because I know lawyers can be expensive. Sometimes retaining a lawyer for a small retainer and a letter from your office, that letterhead, it carries some weight now. It doesn't on the other end of that line where somebody says, wait, this guy got a lawyer, maybe we should take this seriously.
Definitely, especially when you're dealing with smaller insurance companies, getting that lawyer involved right from the beginning where they're saying, hey, I've retained an attorney, here's their letter, or it comes right from the lawyer saying, you need to pay my client X, this happened, it's covered under your policy, reviewed the contract. I always do make it a point to point out what specific provisions within the insurance agreement where it's covered under, and then you're putting the ball in their court saying, you need to give me an explanation as to why you're not going to reimburse my client.
This is a long shot question, but do you ever get calls where maybe if you get away from the home, somebody's on the road and a tree falls because of a storm or flooding sweeps their car away? Is that something where people maybe have a little more wiggle room because, you know, they don't have a homeowner policy, but they have certainly car insurance. But again, does it fall under act of God, or could they have some wiggle room again where you say, look, it's not my fault the road suddenly turned into a river and my car got pushed up against a bridge?
Right. In situations like that, it always depends. If it's something like what's been happening recently, right, I would always argue it should be covered under your car insurance. Say you're driving like throughout the Hudson Valley where we saw multiple roads and bridges being dammed effectively. If you're driving through and you are suffering as a result of that, and your insurance company isn't willing to reimburse you or at least contribute to parts of the cost, that's definitely something you need to consider retaining a lawyer for.
I'm curious, you may not know the answer to this, but if you're not in a floodplain and you saw this, what happened, thought, you know, I want to be prepared for everything. I want flood insurance anyway. Can you typically get it, even if it seems ridiculous to the insurance company? Hey, it never floods where you are?
Definitely. In my experience, anytime you're working with your insurance broker, if you opt for extra coverage, they're always going to be willing to accommodate you. And like I said earlier, the good part is if you're not in a flood zone and you just want flood insurance for that extra beneficial state of mind, they're almost always going to work with you in offering that coverage.
I guess, too, if you're on top of a hill, they're going to look and say, well, Ryan, if you really want to pay for insurance, they're not going to charge you a ridiculous amount because they think they're never going to make a claim on it.
Definitely, and that's why those costs can really be nominal. I wouldn't be surprised to see flood insurance be something to the effect of $20 if you're in a situation like that where you're on top of a hill. This most likely won't ever happen, but you want that peace of mind.
And I'm guessing, this is my silly question for you, we had one case in a town where the beavers dammed the water and then the dam gave it. You can't sue the beavers, right? That's just the way it goes, right?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, they're not really able to stand for litigation at this time, so you usually have to go after your own insurance company to get paid.
Gotcha. I hope you didn't mind me being a little silly there with that question. Ryan, thanks for coming in. Hopefully we got some good information. And hey, if it's not a lot of money, if it's pennies on the dollar, check that box next time you get the insurance, right?
Absolutely. Always agree.
All right. Ryan McCall from Tully Rinky, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Campuses in New York are set to see major changes to how hate crimes are being reported. Coming up, we'll break down the details on the new standards schools will be facing from New York State. Welcome back to Empire State Weekly. I'm John Gray in Albany. Governor Kathy Hochul signing a new law that will require college campuses to strengthen hate crime reporting. According to Governor Hochul's office, law enforcement agencies reported 947 hate crimes in the state in 2022, the most reported in the last 5 years, at a 20% increase compared to 2021. Lawmakers say this legislation will help bring more accountability to campuses across the state.
This legislation mandates that any college that receives state aid has to implement a plan to effectively investigate hate crimes, has to inform incoming students about the procedures on campus of how they investigate those hate crimes, and also report any incident of hate or bias that happens on campus, that they have to put it onto their websites.
Governor also announcing $51 million will be going towards improving the safety of organizations at risk of hate crimes, such as religious institutions, daycares, and cultural museums. A state appeals court ordering new congressional lines to be drawn here for New York State before next November's election. The state's redistricting commission has been directed to create new district lines by the appellate division of the state Supreme Court. This reverses a lower court ruling that allowed the current maps to remain until the year 2030. Democrats argued for a second set of maps, while Republicans plan to appeal this decision. Another new law now in effect at hospitals and nursing homes bans the practice of giving mandatory overtime to nurses. Healthcare workers have been increasingly expected to work long hours because of the pandemic. This new law aims to retain nurses who could be facing burnout while working too many long shifts. Any facilities that mandate overtime will be penalized by the Department of Labor. One advocate explains this step is best for both the nurses and the patients.
We know that the best care is provided by nurses who are rested. They don't feel overworked, and they feel that they have the support that we need to provide the best care to our patients and our general community.
Stick around. We'll be back with a look at the week ahead in just a moment. By the way, if you have any comment or story idea, let us know about it. You can email us at news@news10.com. You can also reach out on Twitter at WTEN. Finally, on Empire State Weekly, we are looking ahead to next week as the governor is set to have a first in a series of 10 listening sessions on environmental legislation. These sessions are aimed at advancing the $4.2 billion Clean Water, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act. The act makes significant investments in green jobs infrastructure all across the state. We'll keep an eye on any developments from those sessions. From all of us now here at Empire State Weekly, I'm John Gray in Albany. We'll see you right here next week. And don't forget, you can watch Empire State Weekly all over New York State. Here's the full schedule of Empire State Weekly on 10 television stations across this great state of New York.